Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me there? Everyone hear me all right? So, for all that in my CV, I'm still nervous talking to a crowd that I can't see thanks to the lights. One of the main reasons that international development agencies struggle to achieve maximum possible outcomes from their projects is that we constantly underestimate the challenging nature of behaviour change. So today my aim is to raise your awareness of this issue in the hope that you'll be able to take that increased awareness out to your own projects and perhaps see some improved outcomes. Because the reality is there's no such thing as a perfect project. All we can do is chase continual improvement. So I have a question for you, and it's not a rhetorical one. If I can make it move, would be good. I need the next slide, please. Are you ready to be challenged? Excellent. So I should warn you that I'm going to try to disgust you all before I leave the stage today. Sorry about that, but don't worry, I'm going to ease you into it. I'm going to start with a nice, gentle conversation about open defecation. Or for those who don't like the word defecation, that's shitting outside. Toilet humour is all very well and good, and I know more toilet jokes than most people here, but you know, open defecation, next slide please, is a major problem in the developing world. Do I need to point this over here? Oh, that's it, okay. In 2016, more than 500,000 children under the age of 5 died from diarrhoea. And the people at UNICEF tell us that about 90% of those were caused by poor wash conditions, that's poor water, sanitation and hygiene conditions. One of the other major impacts of poor wash conditions is being tackled by, got to go back one now, being tackled by Operation Toilets, a project at the Rotary Club of Box Hill Central. Millions of girls drop out of school on reaching puberty, and about a quarter of them say it's because their schools have no toilets. Millions more skip school when they've got their period, with almost all of them saying that lack of toilets in the school is the reason for doing so. And yet millions more don't drink water when they're at school during the day because they're afraid they might need to go to the toilet. Can you imagine how awful that must be for them? So Operation Toilets has been running for about 4 years, and in that time we've reached around 30,000 children. Our first global grant was audited by the Rotary Foundation, and this was a project over 7 schools, about 5,000 children, and they found some really promising signs. 6 months after the project was finished, they found that 10 to 15% reduction in absentee days among adolescent girls in the school, and they also found a 10 to as much as 25% increase in enrolment among adolescent girls in the school. Very promising. Some of those girls coming from schools nearby that didn't have toilets, and others actually returning to the education system because their school of choice now had toilets. But even more exciting than that, in early January this year, 7 of us, 6 from Box Hill Central, 1 from Croydon, were in India unveiling some new toilets in a couple of different locations. One of them was in Delhi. It was part of a global grant covering 11 schools, about 7,000 children. School number 10 was being unveiled, and someone from the North Delhi Municipal Corporation came along, senior representative came along and told us they'd been watching this global grant for its 2-year life, and they were so excited with what they'd seen that they decided to roll out their own wash education program based on what we've been doing in these 11 schools. But they're rolling it out in more than 700 schools, reaching 300,000 plus children. The power of Rotary at work, and even better, getting other people to do our work for us, but to do it our way. Isn't that great? So, unfortunately though, building toilets doesn't stop people defecating in the open. The most common methodology used for stopping open defecation in communities is called Community-Led Total Sanitation, or CLTS. The way this works is the organiser of the CLTS intervention goes to the village, they get all the residents of the village into a central location, and together they draw a map of the village in the dirt. Then every family gets a rock which they put on the map in the location of their home. And then they go on what's known in the trade as a walk of shame. They follow the organiser of this intervention out into the fields behind the village, and as they're walking along, the organiser will be saying, "Who went to the toilet there this morning? Is that yours there? Did you go there?" As you can imagine, the villagers aren't really enjoying this experience, and they certainly don't put their hands up and own up to it. And just when they're thinking this can't go on too much longer, the organiser cranks it up a notch. In some cases, they'll go as far as putting a latex glove on their hand, scooping up a fresh deposit and sticking it in a plastic bag, and then taking it back where the map is, with the villagers very reluctantly in tow at this stage. They get back to the map and the plastic bag's tipped onto the ground. The organiser has a swig of a glass of water, and then he takes a dead fly and dips it into the shit that he's just put on the ground, and dips the feet into the water and offers a glass of water to the villagers. I'm sure you won't be surprised to hear nobody wants it. But what does happen is often quite dramatic. It's been known to happen same evening, that people are knocking on their neighbours' doors saying, can we please use your toilet until we've built our own? They're talking to the village elders saying, we've got to get construction underway now, and they're talking to the organisers of the intervention, whether it's Rotary or someone else, about how to fund it. Operation Toilets was set up because working in schools, we don't need to be so brutal. I'm sure you'll all agree that's a pretty brutal approach to behaviour change, highly impactful. But the nice thing in schools is we can put a gentler approach to behaviour change by putting a wash education program into the schools, which will cover such things as proper toilet use, hand washing with soap for the adolescent girls and the female teachers, will be menstrual hygiene management. And for the school management, the teachers and the children, there'll also be education about maintenance and cleaning, which I wanted to look at briefly. If I could put this video on, no sound please. These are the toilets in a school in India that I visited about 2.5 years ago. These are the girls' toilets. I was in there under a minute filming this, and the stench stayed in my nose for hours. I could almost taste it. So I went back a year later wanting to film with commentary, but I couldn't go in because there were too many snakes in the building, and yet the girls were still using it as their toilet. In January this year, we were back in India unveiling these toilets in a couple of schools, and in this school as well. And we were accompanied by Rotary Foundation trustee Julia Phelps. And I took Julia for a walk through these toilets because I wanted her to see what the girls have been living with. And I've got to tell you, Julia was really shaken. She came out of that toilet block in tears. They weren't the only tears on the day. Might need the next slide, please. No, that's it, yeah. The other tears on the day were much happier as we were handing over new drinking water stations, hand washing stations, new toilets. Are they the most beautiful, is that the most beautiful toilet block you've ever seen? Gorgeous, isn't it? 30 toilets for 1,300 children in this school who I'm so happy to say never need to return to the abomination that you saw in that video before. One of the most impactful exercises in community-wide behaviour change ever, anywhere in the world, happened right here in Australia in the early 1970s when seatbelts were made compulsory. Some numbers from 2017 show the difference between a country where we've done something about it and a country where we really haven't done much. In Australia, 97% of drivers were wearing seatbelts. In India, it was 27% at the time. Front seat passengers, again, 97% in Australia, India 15%, and in the back seat in Australia, 92%, in India, almost nobody, 4%. But what amazes me most about those numbers, not the Indian figures, it's the Australian figures. 50 years almost since we tried to get everyone to wear seatbelts in Australia, and we've still got stragglers. If that doesn't tell you that behaviour change is difficult, I've got nothing else for you. And the problem with behaviour change in the field of open defecation is if even one person continues shitting in the fields, the whole village can get sick. I'm not providing solutions today, I'm bringing this to your attention because this is complicated stuff. Now, in May last year, I was a speaker at a district conference in Chicago. One of the other speakers was Brad Howard, a past director of Rotary International. He was also a past chair of Rotary International's Membership Development and Retention Committee, whose replacement was here on the stage just before. And he said a couple of things which really resonated with me. He said, Rotary is not a service organisation. It's a members organisation, and members discover service through the organisation. And if we don't look after our members, we won't have any members. And I've been hearing a bit of this theme already today. And it struck me that I could do something to look after my friends at the Rotary Club of Nasik Road, being our oldest partners in India. So I approached my club board with a proposal for a new international project. And I'm very happy to say they accepted my proposal without variation. And so, armed with my shiny new budget of $268, I put together a presentation on road safety, and I took it with me to India on my next visit, and I'd arranged to be the guest speaker at the Rotary Club of Nasik Road, where I introduced them to the idea that wearing seatbelts is a good idea. Can I have this video on, please? This video, I'm sure you'll all recognise something similar from back in the 70s. They hadn't seen anything like it before, and they were so surprised that at 40 kilometres an hour, you could hurt yourself like that. They'd all been thinking, well, seatbelts are only good if you're going at high speed in head-on collisions, where we know that they're probably not much use in those kinds of accidents. A couple of days after the presentation, this message started appearing in all emails from the club to its members. And then not long after that, I was invited to present the same initiative at their district conference at the beginning of January this year. And a number of their presidents have since told, there are 104 club presidents at that district conference, and a number of them have now started putting the same message at the end of their emails. So quite exciting. A couple of days later, we were in Nasik unveiling those beautiful yellow toilets that you saw before, and the day after that, we were invited to visit another school, a wealthy school, and they were starting a general knowledge quiz. And when the first slide came up, this was on the slide. Mission message, be safe on roads, seat belts are for everyone. So I'm pretty excited that they'd taken this tiny little initiative and were trying to do something with it. And then they told us that this quiz is going out to 2 million kids in India in the next 2 years. So, which is pretty good reach for a project with a $268 budget, I'd say, particularly when I tell you we haven't spent any of it yet. So if my President-elect Gay is in the audience, you need to keep that for next year. I'm going to use it. If you don't take anything else from my talk today, take this with you. Next time you go to visit your international partners, tell them you want to do something for them. The United Nations tells us if people in the developing world started taking seatbelts and motorcycle helmets seriously, hundreds of thousands of lives would be saved. They also tell us that in the age group from 14 to 29, road accidents are the single greatest cause of death on the planet, bar none, and 93% of those deaths happen in the developing world, where people aren't serious about seatbelts and motorcycle helmets. But now I'm actually coming to the bit you've all been waiting for, which is the challenge I mentioned earlier. I'm going to challenge you all to change your hand-washing behaviour. That sounds pretty easy, doesn't it? Some of you don't need to change your hand-washing behaviour, and if you can all just sit quietly while I speak with everyone else. You've probably seen people wash their hands like this when they come out of a public toilet. Yeah, I heard a couple of laughs. Okay, good. So the World Health Organization says if you're doing that, stop it. You're better off leaving without washing your hands, because all you're doing there is wetting your hands and making it easier to pick up nasty bugs from the surfaces around you. This one's a little better in that I'm using soap, but what you'll see here, I wet the soap, I put the wet soap on my hands, I rinse it off. I'm not giving the soap a chance to do its thing. The World Health Organization is very clear on it. If you're serious about hand hygiene, 20 seconds, minimum 20 seconds required. Now I've sped this up because no one really needs to watch me wash my hands for 20 seconds, but you'll get the idea. Suds on the back, suds on the front, scrub between the fingers, under the nails, 20 seconds before you wash it off. And the WHO says if you're doing less than that, you're not serious about hand washing. Now, there's been a lot of research done at universities around the Western world that's shown that as many as 65% of men and 35% of women in the Western world do not wash their hands at all after using a public toilet. Some doctors will say, you know, men don't need to wash their hands after urinating. Other doctors will say, well, yes, they do, of course, but I'm not here to talk science with you, I'm just here to disgust you. Because I want you to know what it feels like to our beneficiaries when we trigger a sense of disgust in them. And so I guess now the question comes, do you want to know what that trigger is, or should I leave the stage while you still like me a bit? I'm going to answer it. That was a rhetorical question. I'm going to tell you anyway. The trigger is, I don't like saying it, the trigger is underwear sweat. See, human beings sweat, and we do it all the time. We sweat on our hands, we sweat in our socks and our foreheads, and we sweat in our underwear. The University of Arizona's microbiology department was able to quantify this. They showed that all underwear is contaminated with fecal matter as soon as it's been worn, and our sweat then spreads it. And I'm going to leave your imaginations to decide whether that's an issue or not. But there's been other research done around the world that says when people are confronted with that kind of information, their attitude to hand washing changes. Now, I'm never going to know whether some of you will suddenly find yourselves quietly counting to 20 next time you wash your hands after leaving a public toilet. But in my capacity as a very proud member of the World Toilet Organization Hall of Fame, I invite you to think of my disapproval the next time you think of leaving a public toilet without washing your hands. Now, I'm probably going to use this as my time to step away gracefully while you contemplate that whole disgusting issue, with just a quick reminder that Operation Toilets has a stand at the exhibition hall, and if you'd like to come and talk shit with us, we'll welcome you with, we'll welcome you with open arms and washed hands too, of course. Thanks very much.